The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Welcome to it. Weekend editions here at Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbal. We are loaded up. Plenty to recap with last weekend. The spring game, of course. Not a lot in the first half. A few, as they say, good things in the second half. So we can dive into that. It's been a fun week of some talking points between college football and Nebraska, FPI projections, and, of course, a good story from Mitch Sherman on Nebraska's rise back to prominence. You know, the last 2 decades were well documented and detailed. How does Nebraska get out of that funk for football? Numbers to get in, 466-3776, 466-3776, 800-825-5865. Can email the show, Chris at HailVarsity.com. Give us a follow. Find us on Twitter. And you can stream us on ESPN Lincoln throughout the week or weekend. Twitter handles, Chris Schmidt at Schmidt_radio. That's me. And at Herbal Essence for Elijah Herbal. We will effort Mark Kraynak by the kickoff in Ireland to have a new Twitter handle.
I would have tweeted last Saturday something along the lines of, this sucks, in the first half.
Yeah, and we were all...
Hashtag this sucks.
We were going to look at each other wondering, is it over yet in the first half? But I caught myself...
What is that? What are you doing?
I caught myself and said, hey, we're out. We're in the stadium. We're watching football. Even if your beer's 3/4 gone, you still got a little beer left. All right? So I know
that part I liked. I like the the community element of it. It's great. Back with Husker Nation, you get to see the players running around. But it was very similar to like when the Pro Bowl was on,
right?
And I didn't even know. I wasn't keeping up on like what the rules were going to be for the Pro Bowl, so I didn't know that was the case. Mm-hmm. But I flipped to it. I saw 2 plays. I was like, I'm out. Well, let's watch Shark Tank.
Right.
Like, this is ridiculous.
It was
just ridiculous.
I need your perspective, man, because you were Father of the Year last weekend, like many Nebraskans, taking their little ones to Memorial Stadium. And your kids have gone before, and you've taken them to some pretty big-time games. But you got them down. It's the spring game, and it was great to see your little ones at inside the Graduate over at Single Barrel. We had a fun pregame. Offensive lineman Gilmore was really cool to meet. Aiden's a nice dude. 6'5" offensive guard. That was cool. He came on set with us. So what did your kids think? Were they all pissed off about the first half?
Bored.
Okay.
Like saying, I want to go. That never happens.
Ever.
In a game.
Like,
it never happens at the spring game, but it was just kind of like they were just baffled the whole time, confused.
What
like,
why is the score
Dad?
that?
Why is the score that? Like, they're just getting to the point where they finally get the sport and they understand the points and the meaning of everything. And then it's just all thrown out the window, like, completely. The defense is scoring 2 points for a sack that's not a sack.
So if it's a first half of thudding and you two-hand touch them, yeah, that's a sack. It's just not your normal football sack.
Dude, the loudest cheer was a punt in a meaningless first half of a spring game.
Do we need to detail punting last year?
Well, look, I get that. I understand that there was somewhat of a sarcastic cheer.
He kicked it 64 yards in his first try. This is going to be awesome. Followed up by another shank. Well, let's be honest about our homeboy from Montana. He's a guy that is. We were talking to him. He's like, yeah, I want kind of a nice neighborhood. I mean, he's talking about things you say in your 30s, which is sweet. from a maturity standpoint. But yeah, looking for a nice home for me and my wife. Once woodworking's a high priority for him, and seriously, to his credit.
Actually, that's good to know.
Right.
That we have a weird punter. I like that. Give me I don't want a normal punter with like normal outlooks on life. No, they got to be cut from a different cloth.
Right.
I'm good with that.
And so
I'm actually more confident now that I know this information.
Wind at his back, he was fine. Kicking into that gale force, no one's going to do any good. Now, and he was probably instructed to not show anything because the guy's, a disciple of Sam Cooke, where he has 40 different pitches per se, punts. So if he's kicking into the wind come Big Ten season, I'm sure he's rugbying that son of a gun, or he's going to angle it or do something. I don't worry about him averaging 31 and a half into the wind.
Me either. Yeah, no, you're right. I get it. And I'm not saying that to clown him.
No, I know.
I'm just saying we've reached the point where it's just like, look, during the spring, they do scrimmage. They do tackle to the ground, right? Like that happens, right?
Mm-hmm. They did
during
in the second half.
At some point?
Yeah. Well, and two of the Saturdays.
Why can't you time it for that? What's like you do have those that the team does tackle each other a couple times this spring. Like, just time it to where when you have, 50,000 paying customers there, you do this. You just time it for that. Like, I don't know.
Well, here's the question. Your needs are their needs. And the way camp shaped up, it was screwy anyway. Because if you probably asked Coach Frost, he would have started a little bit later. But you had a deadline to get spring football in, right? Because you're tearing up the field turf that you won't be paying $24.99 for clumps of because of its losing record, or far be it from the Glory 90s AstroTurf record. Remember those swatches of AstroTurf? Maybe some of us bought for our Husker Den. Anywho, the field turf's being tore up because they need to install the new in time for graduation. So this is when you can do the spring game, fellas. That's what you were up against this year.
Sure. I understand that that's a factor, but I don't understand why you can't have – you do have some tackling to the ground during the spring. You do that. Why can't you time that for when there's actual, again, paying? People pay for that. A lot of spring games across the country are free.
Yeah.
But people made a whole weekend out of it, and then it's just like, what?
Well,
and I'm not even putting it all on Frost or whatever, but it was just it just wasn't right.
So are you going to
everybody in the stands was just sort of like, what?
And there was no beer to start drinking, right? You couldn't go buy a beer. So would you take your kids again next year?
Probably, just because,
feel obligated.
What else are you going to do, right? Yeah, probably. But I don't know. It's there's got to be some happy medium, right? Or there's got to be some more entertainment value when you're bringing that many folks in. It just, I don't know. Is that being too selfish? Is that
no? I don't.
You have a big roster for a reason.
I don't
150
think
guys.
I don't think you're alone. I think there's several hundreds of thousands of Nebraska fans in the state that are shaking their head yes with you this morning about just how you just really couldn't gain or glean. But that's kind of our problem. Is how I look at it. I mean, you know who else was frustrated? Look at old Yant. Yant was getting downhill, ready to smoke somebody, and up 2-yard gain, 2nd and 8. So no, it was a little frustrating.
I will say this, and this was noticeable even with the backup units in the second half, that running back in particular, there is they get north, right? Like that happened no matter who was in. There was something with how they accelerated north that looked different. And even when there were no pads, or even when there was no tackling, and then when there was tackling with the backup guys, like it did appear different. If it appears they've been coached differently. It appears there was just a little more aggressiveness, I guess you'd call it. I liked that look. It was good. I was like, okay, maybe they're going to get north more often. There just wasn't a lot of dancing. There wasn't a lot of, it just seemed like a point of emphasis for them that, like, if you explode through that hole no matter what. Did you notice that too? Was that just me?
Well, Mark, and not only was it the running backs that were getting north and south. I mean, I feel like I actually did see what has been preached about the offensive line all spring, which is the fact that they're firing off the ball better this year. You saw that. You saw especially from the offensive
engagement.
Guards, getting north and south, moving the defensive line backwards off the line of scrimmage. I feel like you saw that. Now, we can talk about the pass protection all you want because that was atrocious. That was hard to watch at times.
Even with 10 Mississippi.
Yeah, I mean, Garrett Nelson was just having his way in the backfield. Just did not matter what the offensive line was doing. It was just every single move was coming off.
Spring game overreaction. Oh no, get your tackles healthy. Okay, that's one for me. Two is I loved hearing about how good the receiving core is. Didn't see much of them, right? Just because you didn't see much of Casey Thompson. I like Rollins. You want to talk about forgotten man, right, in the tight end recruiting class?
Yeah.
Dude looked really nice going up and I know just one reception, but, man, he looked big time and athletic. So I'm going to take that and put it in my back pocket if I'm a Nebraska fan and say, all right, got a dude that can get open. Purdy, for as limited as he was, like 3 practices or whatever it kind of amounted to, I thought he made a hell of a throw. And I'm glad that Harburg was in. I thought he had a really good seam route throw. I think they see some potential in him. And he's a talented dude. And good. Get him some reps. Let him go live because they had limited film on him. So I'm good with all of that. And to your point, Kraynak, you too, Elijah. Yeah, I think you've got a common goal and take between O-line and running back, right? Coaches, fire off, move your defensive linemen, don't jack around and get north and south if you're the running back. That is one common thing from Whipple to Applewhite to Raiola of, okay, we're in unison even though it's just spring. This is how we're going to run the football. And that's good. There's just not a lot of side to side and then cut that we've seen out of the shotgun zone read give maybe the last few years. There's just too many times where someone missed a block or there was some lateral movement versus north-south movement from the running game.
Yeah, they accelerated. And too early prediction, way too early prediction. Chubba Purdy's going to be breathing down Thompson's neck in the fall.
Okay.
Thompson's going to have the start, and there's nothing I saw in the spring that says he shouldn't or should. To be honest, I mean, you just didn't see a lot of them. But he's clearly the front runner, and Purdy didn't practice a lot during the spring. He only practiced the past, like the week leading into the spring game, essentially. But in his limited time that you saw him in the spring game, he can move. He's a lot faster than I think anybody really thought. He could throw it pretty well. He looks good. Again, limited duty, playing against backups. I understand all that, but he looks like he belongs. He doesn't look like the moment's too big at all. And it's not even one of those things where it's like, oh, he's got potential. It's more like, no, he looks ready to go now. Again, limited action. But he seems like he's going to be a guy that's going to push the issue. And you just wonder, when and if Casey Thompson struggles and you have somebody that's that capable as a backup, pretty interesting, right? Nebraska hasn't seen that in a long time. We haven't had that in a long, long time.
Well, and Nebraska hasn't had a season where the starting quarterback starts all 12 games dating back to, I don't even know when. Is it pre-Taylor Martinez?
You got to go back to Riley. Probably. Tommy Armstrong.
Did Tommy Armstrong start every game? I think there was there was not a season, I don't think, where he started all 12
I think he started
games.
all of them in 2015.
I thought Riker 5 came in for the last game of the year that year.
No?
Oh, yeah, he may have.
That was
Tennessee.
20.
No, that was 2016.
2016 was when he came in. Riker 5 played Tennessee. Okay.
Yeah, well, in Riker, Riker started against Tennessee, but
point taken. Right,
yes.
But Fife was not pushing Armstrong for the starting role.
No.
At all. Right? He just had to do it because of injury. And it just looks like you have a chance here with the quarterback room for there to be some legitimate competition. To where if you're not getting it done, there's a capable guy ready to come in. Mm-hmm. You had that with Martinez and McCaffrey, but in hindsight, how ready was McCaffrey really?
Well, how capable was he? If you're asking him to throw 25, 30 times a game,
of course, right? And so you saw how that worked out, but it just does look like you have a lot more competent quarterback play across the board, rather than just one guy and then some clear backups. Purdy does not look like a clear backup. It just doesn't. And Harburg showed some good things. And then you have Smothers, who has started a Big Ten game already and almost beat Iowa. Mm-hmm. And he probably looked the worst out of all of them for, it was one practice, so you don't take too much out of it. But, you have some actual competition in that quarterback room, and hopefully that kind of lifts all boats.
Do you worry about Nebraska at the quarterback spot from an injury standpoint? To your point, Elijah, with some injury history, you look at Purdy and you look at Casey Thompson. Now, Casey had the thumb thing and he fought through it, and Purdy, that's why he's here. I think he's probably just got behind at Florida State because he was dinged. I mean, do you worry about guys kind of changing their history from an injury standpoint, being able to stay active and mobile and not dinged, as physical as the Big Ten is?
Well, I worry less about it because, again, I think you have options, where, think about it. Say Casey Thompson goes down game one. At the very least, you have a Logan Smothers who's been there and done that and performed pretty well against a really good defense, right? So you have him. He's there. And then you have Purdy, who looks like a more talented Purdy might be the most talented quarterback on the roster, at least from what I saw, unless I'm tripping. But
no, just more fluid throwing the ball.
And faster. The dude's fast. He was you hear about Logan Smothers' speed, but yet I haven't seen it totally translate to the field yet. Mm-hmm. Right? And he is fast. We know he is because of his track times from when he was in Alabama. He was like a top 5 sprinter. So he is fast, but translating that to the football field and seeing it on game day is kind of a different story. And Purdy looks like the fastest one that they have. So I came away encouraged by that. I'm just being like, okay, you don't have just one guy and then cross your fingers and hope to God he doesn't get hurt. It's like, okay, you have your top guy and then you have a couple other guys that are going to really push him. And if something does happen with number one, number two's not a distant number two.
Nope, there's some options there. It's Mark Kraynak, Chris Schmidt, and Elijah Herbal. Weekend edition of Hail Varsity Radio. A quick timeout. We'll dive more into the spring game. Our rewind is next. Spring game looms for the Pirate. We had a chance to sit down with Mike Leach, get his take on the topic of NIL. You've heard from Dabo. You heard from Coach Saban this week on the state of college football. What's the Pirate think about it? And we'll also dive into some things that are maybe not football related with Coach Leach. That's on the way. Brandon Vogel in less than an hour. Gary Sharp, the Iron Horse. More spring game thoughts with Hail Varsity. Hello, listener. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity Radio, and I wanted to let you know about a special deal just for listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast. We're offering $10 off the annual subscription price of $29.99. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we do. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Now back with Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery with Chris Schmidt and Mark Kraynak.
Coach, how we doing?
I'm doing good. How you been?
Been good. Just keeping busy and following Junior around with baseball. How's spring ball treating you?
Been pretty good. We're getting better. It's we have a lot of enthusiasm. We go out there, we're enthusiastic. We're raw and sloppy at times, but we do a lot of good things.
With spring ball, who is it you? Is it your assistants? Is it guys that are back that help kind of lead that energy?
Well, I think our assistants do a good job, but just Mississippi in general, and I think part of it because growing up, they didn't have a lot of other things, but they're always enthusiastic to get out there and play and to hit one another. And so I think our teams like that, we have a very close team, and part of it is I think starting back, they're approximately the same age, which was freshman, sophomore, and then even delayed further by the COVID year. And so I think they're used to being around each other and really enjoy each other's company. And it's one of the closest teams I've ever been a part of. Close doesn't always, generally speaking, it's good. It's usually good. But close can also mean comfortable, where you're just comfortable with where you're at and, everybody's happy. And then there's not quite the pressure to perform that you would like at times. And, but we do seem pretty competitive, and I'm still kind of waiting to see how it comes out. But, we're playing hard, and we're doing some good stuff.
Mike Leach with us here, Hail Varsity Radio, the Pirate Mississippi State head coach, and chatting and getting caught up. And you guys started spring ball a couple weeks back. And I wanted to ask you about it is baseball season. It gets going tomorrow. Is there a Mike Leach moment on the mound? Have you ever thrown out the first pitch?
I have thrown out the first pitch, and you'll think I'm lying, but I'm not. I threw it out at a minor league team. Let me see. I've thrown it out at Texas Tech, at a minor league team in Midland, at a minor league team in Iowa. It seems like I'm missing one.
Anywhere in Washington State?
I think I threw it out there, too. Anyway, but at the Houston Astros, too. I threw it out at the Houston Astros. And always invited to do it at the Texas Rangers, but they were during the season and stuff. But and the weirdest thing, and I can't do this going out there right now. I've always been able to throw, so to speak, but every one of them was a strike. And I didn't do that stuff where you go in the fringe of the grass and I'd go to the mound because I'd mess up the mound. I'd make sure they had to rake that mound again. If you're going to have me throw out the opening pitch, no, you're raking your mound again. And then the other thing is because you get hustle-bustled in, and you don't have time to warm up or anything like that. And and I'm a little stunned to say this myself to the positive, they have all been strikes. Every one of them's been a strike. And what's crazy about that is I can't go out there on our practice field right now, have somebody hold the glove and get the distance and throw 5 in a row strikes. I could maybe throw it, and we call it striker ball, and I don't walk the guy. That could possibly happen, but there's no way I throw 5 in a row strikes. No chance. but for, I don't know, for luck or good karma or something, they've all been strikes.
Mike Leach with us. It's got to be rising to the moment, man, right? You're feeding off the crowd.
Well, and worse yet, you're throwing downhill, because how often you think I've thrown off of a mound in the last 40 years or whatever? And
5?
Yeah, exactly, 5. And then, so instinctively, you got to aim low. And now I do the full windup too, because you're getting your money's worth. And I'm surprised every time it happens.
So, what's your motion like? Are you a Juan Marichal? Are you Dan Quisenberry, a submarine artist? What's your motion like?
No, I'm kind of 3/4. So basically, hands together at the front. Okay, then, and then the most important thing is a guy needs to be able to balance up. I would say average leg kick, but I do kind of, bring it up so it's parallel. And if you're a good pitcher, I used to coach baseball. If you're a good pitcher, you should be able to hold it in that position. Then you're balanced, right?
Yeah.
So I try to get it to there. So it'll be hands in front, hands over the head as I torque and balance up. And then just try to make sure that foot aims at the glove, and my arm's over the foot pretty much, And then, I also try to stare a hole into the glove. Never take your eyes off the glove, because a lot of times your body will follow your eyes. And then, of course, off that mound, you want to aim a little low because you're not used to throwing that. But again, it's not like you're going to get warm-ups.
No, you don't.
They take you underneath the stadium. Take a few pictures. Hi, nice to meet you. Glad you're here. Blah, blah, blah. Nowhere to warm up. And you just go throw the sucker, and then you get a free baseball.
What'd you hit at the gun? Have you been timed?
No, I do. I'm not trying to be overpowering if I throw in the first pitch.
You just want to strike.
I'm just trying to hit it. But the thing is, if you back off too much, it's going to alter your motion, and you're not going to be any good. So I try to have a nice, smooth, crisp motion.
Coach, the question everyone wants an answer from you. Will Smith, Chris Rock, real or fake?
I think it's real.
What'd you think?
I think it's real. I think there's a point where, folks getting, I think Chris Rock knew he was going to have a big night. Maybe he'd had some alcohol, maybe he hadn't, I don't know. But, there's usually a pre-party to these things, and they get to, feeling good about things, feel like they're untouchable. I did think he deserved the Best Picture. All things considered, and it was a great movie. And then, but no, you can't go up and assault and batter somebody on national television in front of millions of people around the world and not face any consequences. If, the argument can be made you ought to go to jail for a while. Because that's illegal in every country on earth that I can think of. And then Chris Rock, I thought, was a total champ. Took it, went with, just like they teach in improv, took it, went with it, and continued to joke almost without missing much of a beat other than the general recovery from the blow,
It was awkward, it was uncomfortable, and he kept on rolling.
Yeah, he sure did. And then the other thing that was, it looked like Will Smith was initially laughing at the joke. He was initially laughing and had joked about it previously. And then he looks over, and I don't know if she was angry or kind of had a mean mug on the thing. And then, but I'll tell you what, you must think you're something else. You strut up there on stage in the middle of a deal like that. And, we ought to see, what if you go back in time and, there's a lot of fairly good-sized actors.
Yeah.
There's a certain number of good-sized actors, but, stick Will Smith up there and all of a sudden send Jaws up from James Bond or send John Wayne or send, Rosie Greer's been in movies. How would old Will like getting slapped by Rosie Greer?
Yeah, Rosie's a good-sized person for sure. Mike Leach with us. Coach, interesting article out in The Athletic. It's a story, and it's 5 coaches talking about nightmare recruiting visits, a jungle cat, a horse at a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and one of Shaquille O'Neal's pit bulls. Anything that may top the list of animals I've listed for you? Any crazy recruiting visits you remember?
Oh, shoot. One guy we were chasing around, we went by, I can't remember which professional athlete it was. Might have been Spud Webb or it's down, let's see, it was Tim Brown, Spud Webb, Dominic Wilkins, guys like that. They're in Dallas. They have these exotic animals out there in some of the fields. I'm not sure whose they are. Like giraffes and zebras and stuff like that. Just driving by it. Mm-hmm. Crazy stuff like just palatial mansions, like palatial. The guy's got a coach for everything. By the way, plays the piano. Then I'll tell you this, and it was one of the happiest places I've ever been. Happy to the point I kind of didn't want to leave. Okay, so in kind of central Florida, there's a place, and you go down off the main road, go down a dirt road, and this place is country as can be, formulated out there in kind of the woods, but it's more flat, grassy woods, but there's some trees here and there. Okay, there's all these shacks, and they are shacks. The roof is like corrugated metal, like as in you're thinking corrugated metal on top of something. No, in some cases, just corrugated metal, period. Okay? And so it's formed into a cul-de-sac, and you'd go into the house, and you drop deep into a couch, and your fingers would drag kind of on the rug, and as you just playing with your fingers, reach behind the rug, you realize it's all on dirt. The couch and the rug are on dirt, and now they have a TV, and there's an antenna and stuff like that. And but I'll tell you what, outside of there was one of the happiest neighborhoods I've ever been in. It's all formed out like a cul-de-sac. There were kids riding, bikes or whatever, or kicking balls. There were some guys having a basketball game on a real beat-up basketball goal. Rusty rim, no net, and part of the plywood is tore up on it. Parents out there watching their kids talking, some barbecue and stuff outside or whatever. It was a very, very happy place. And it just goes to show you that's what people make of it. Because I've been into some of those mansions where nobody's happy, And then, in between, I mean, there can be plenty of drama with the people, but in between, like just regular middle class, well, heck, I know all about that. So, I mean, that's nothing new because that was me, middle class,
Coach, should there be a parameter at all on the portal? You've had to deal with good and bad portal, and you had one of the ADs talking over the weekend, I think out of the Big Ten, about maybe it's a 2-year wait before you get the free transfer. Do you like that idea?
Well, yeah, I think that among others. There's got to be some restrictions on it. I mean, the NFL doesn't just, you don't just cut and run all the time. You have 2 weeks. You can sort it out in 2 weeks, and we need some limitation like 2 weeks. There's a point to where when it comes to portal and NIL, I mean, everybody's talking about all these players being professionals. Well, they're professional with all the benefits and none of the responsibility. I mean, there's a point to where, there's whether you're professional or whether you're amateur, there's advantages and disadvantages to each. And I think that there's a point to where we have to select, what are they? Are they professionals or are they amateurs? If you're professionals, okay, well, professionals, great. I mean, you can arguably make more money. You can get name, image, and likeness deals. But also, professionals get drafted. Professionals get drafted, and some guy says, well, I want to go to all these big schools, and I'm the best running back in the country. Well, too bad. Molly Putz, New Mexico, has first pick in the draft. and Molly Putz has been waiting to have that first pick, and you're probably going to the beautiful downtown Molly Putz, and the other things, professionals get cut. Mm-hmm. Professionals get traded. Professionals, I think a lot of that is open bribery that's going on with NIL. If guys got cut or traded, I think some of that would go away. It's quite embellished too. And then, they have to pay taxes. You take your gloves off, throw them to the fans. Well, no, if you want a new pair of gloves, you pay for them. Amateur, there's some serious advantages to being an amateur. You don't pay taxes. You in an undistracted fashion, you get an education. I mean, all this we're dumping on these 18-year-olds is pretty tough. I mean, think about when you were 18, and I think about it all the time. Okay, all of a sudden I'm a talented player. I'm able to do a bunch of stuff, and now what am I doing? I'm knocking on doors trying to get car dealers and oil change places and hotels to give me money. I mean, that's an unmitigated nightmare. How good of a player am I going to be? Am I going to watch film? Am I going to be able to adjust to college football? I mean, I think that makes it quite challenging. Am I going to come away with a degree? Probably not. And a degree is a lot more permanent than any of it, Mm-hmm. And then if you're an amateur, I mean, we could always have something like, we could incentivize this amateur thing. I don't think we always look at that the right way. I mean, why not say, all right, if you go to a school for 4 years and exhaust your eligibility and in good standing, you get $100,000 or whatever amount, mm-hmm. At the end, where that's forfeited if you transfer. If you go on the portal or anywhere, that's forfeited. But, some of these NIL deals, if all of a sudden guys are traded and drafted, they're going out the window. Then the NIL deals tend to be national type of things rather than these guys nickel and diamond in various little communities because, all of a sudden, we need a lineman, and so we trade a receiver to San Jose, and then they say how horrible it is for these guys to move around. Well, that's what professionals do. I mean, ask minor league baseball. Look at minor league baseball and how that works, and because that's essentially the model we're at. If we're going to declare everybody professionals.
Pardon the interruption, but I'd like to save you some money. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity, and I wanted to offer listeners of this podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR. Mike Leach with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Coach, 2 trailers have been released in the last 2 weeks. You have Better Call Saul that starts up the 18th, and then, of course, the final 6 episodes of Ozark. Any prediction? What happens to Saul? What happens to Marty Byrde?
Man, I'll tell you what, it's going to be tough to let either of them go. They're certainly going to be tempted to do more.
Mm-hmm.
In both cases. I don't know on the finale. I think Saul's a little harder to predict, to be honest. Ozarks, I can see Ruth coming away with everything.
Yeah.
Better Call Saul. Now, usually finales on these shows aren't, they're not bad, and I don't want to diminish any of the shows, but sometimes the finales can be uncharacteristically bad.
Yeah.
And part of it is because all the cats are out of the bag. You know, you spent however many seasons releasing the cats, and you're just out of cats, you know. And I think that well, now there is one exception to that. Like on one hand, I get the Sopranos finale, okay, but on the other hand, I mean, I don't think anybody was fully satisfied.
No,
I did think it illustrated the paranoia that collectively you placed yourself in and that you would feel, you know. Mm-hmm. But the ultimate, the best finale of all time, and the best episode of the show was Breaking Bad. The finale of Breaking Bad was outstanding and epic. I mean, just incredible. Like, to the point when they did the little movie afterwards, that thing didn't have a chance because, I mean, you're following the grand finale of Breaking Bad with that. I mean, it's just got no chance, you know.
I think El Camino plays in to Saul's ending. I think Jesse and Saul end up in Alaska together.
Yeah, it appears that way, but and then I do think it backgrounds stuff a little bit, and it tucks a corner or two in. Mm-hmm. Okay, but how about that? And I've talked a lot about Breaking Bad, and it's a very good show. I don't know that's my favorite, but because actually Saul was my favorite character on that. You go to law school, and then but he. What a finale that was, though. I mean, just unbelievable. Just an unbelievable finale. And how they arrived at that finale after so many twisted turns and jumps in that plot over the years. The finale of Breaking Bad is just epic. And then, because I almost didn't finish Breaking Bad, I started the first season, and I thought the first season of Breaking Bad was quite boring. But you have to introduce the characters, and there would always be a cliffhanger at the end of each episode. So they drugged me along. But it's very important to introduce all the characters. And the second season did not start out well for me. And then after the third episode, I said, all right, one more. If it doesn't pick up, I'm out. And then I gave it one more. Well, then it explodes, And then and throughout you're wondering why they had the name Breaking Bad. And boy, it was Breaking Bad. I mean, everybody on that show turned bad. Mm-hmm. Remember when everybody on that show was handicapped?
Yeah.
For a while, every character's handicapped. Okay, so the detective's handicapped, the kid's handicapped. I mean, and I counted it up. There were like 5 handicapped at all the same time. Something broken, something busted, something, gone.
Coach, last thought. Mike Leach with us, Mississippi State head coach. Did you grow up with a girl in high school like Ruth from Yellowstone?
Yeah, all of them. Hey, that was Wyoming. I'll tell you this. We did have this. Once in a while, those rodeo girls would start fighting over a guy or just be mad about something. And so you'd be in the quad. And it wasn't unusual. I mean, not likely maybe, but there might be the homecoming queen, or not the rodeo queen, and she might dip,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And then, but anyway, especially the rodeo girls, but just girls in general. I mean, like on Seinfeld, they talk, everybody wants to see a girl fight. And that's true. And then, people pretend they don't, but if you're in high school, you definitely do. And so, I don't know, I remember these two rodeo girls got upset with one another. And so you come to the quad after lunch, and everybody knows it's going to come down, and they're kind of circling around, and everybody's in their little group looking to see where this girl is, that girl is. And then all of a sudden they bolt towards each other and collide in the middle. And then the other thing, and it's a combination of a fist and claw. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. A fist and claw, which is honestly quite effective. Delivering blows, but also yanking out the handfuls of hair.
Beth is a beauty, man. They got after it like damn in a cat. To say they got after it like cats is not quite accurate, because there's a little more brutality in the punch there. Their daddies had taught them to punch. I bet. And growing up with horses and all that. So then, and then it went on for like 3 days. Really?
At lunch, you go out there again, and they just start bolting for each other. And in the end, I'm not sure they weren't cousins, or distant cousins or something, but I don't know. They, there were some Ruths in there. There weren't all Ruths. I mean, Wyoming's a great place, the most straightforward people on earth, and also typically do, like Mississippi, work hard, do stuff with their hands that they take for granted that other people are like, what are you doing? What are you touching? What you're going to grab that? And they and so the women were tough, but then, also just some, just some very delightful people, just great people. But, no, you didn't want to cross. There's definitely folks you didn't want to cross.
Mike Leach with us. I had to figure out if there was a Beth in the crowd, and you said all of them. That's pretty good.
No, it wasn't all. They're all that tough, but they weren't all that ruthless. Believe me.
Coach, we'll get caught up after spring ball and check in before summertime. How's that sound?
Sounds good. Anytime.
Take care, bud. Appreciate it.
All right. See ya.
Hello, listener. This is Brandon Vogel, managing editor of Hail Varsity, and I wanted to let you know about a special deal just for listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast. We're offering $10 off the annual subscription price of $29.99. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce, 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
The Hail Varsity Radio Saturday Morning Show, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Strap yourselves in. Here are your hosts, Chris Schmidt.
Y'all don't even know he was a virgin until he's 28, and now, roll tide.
And Mark Kraynak.
Time has come for someone to put his foot down. And that foot is me.
Back with you, it's Hour 2, Weekend Edition, Hail Varsity Radio, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbal. Good stuff from the Pirate, Mike Leach, on the topic of, Beth and, of course, Ozark. So all that's cranking up soon. Oh, yeah, some football sprinkled in as well. We say hi to Brandon Vogel, HailVarsity.com and magazine managing editor, and, of course, author with John Cook, Dream Like a Champion. Find Vogues on Twitter at Brandon L. Vogel. Vogues, was a spring game all you wanted?
No, well, I would say it was not. And I mean, Nebraska was dealing with some real limitations in terms of just numbers, of course, and then, wrote about this a little bit in the April issue. I think the advent of televised spring games has made these worse as a fan experience kind of across the country as teams try to show less and less. So anytime, this is my spring game rule. Anytime there's a modified scoring system in place, you're going to be in for typically a rough day. I mean, honestly, like if Nebraska had to do that, wouldn't you rather just show up and watch them just run an actual practice? Because then at least you'd be like, well, okay, that's what a practice looks like, which a lot of us don't get to see. That would be my preference.
Brandon, you're exactly right. That's the thing, is that there's something better than what we saw that can be done, right? Like, I mean, you have 50,000 paying fans. They're all paying $10. Everybody's spending their entire Saturday afternoon. They do tackle to the ground during the spring. That does happen. Why can't you time that for when there's actual paying customers in the house? Or to your point, like, stop doing the modified. Like, nobody understood what was going on.
Yeah, it's not good when you need a chart to try and keep up with what's happening. Like I said, I think we all understand it. We know where Nebraska was at, but it just becomes each one of these tends to offer a little bit of diminishing returns. Because I think the excitement around it gets billed more and more as a quote unquote game, which we in the media. That's how we treat it. And it's kind of how we have to treat it, given the interest around it, particularly at a place at Nebraska. And then you get there and you're about, I'd say 10, 12 minutes in, and you're like, oh, yeah, that's what this is. And it's typically not the best feeling.
No, there was some frustration. But overall, let's go to the showcase aspect of it, because that's what this is. This is another simulation to get kids on campus, either home or away, and show them what Nebraska is all about in a limited setup with spring. It's not the full Monty of a game day Saturday, but it's maybe that appetizer to the main course of a fall visit. Nebraska still does that at an extremely high level, and the impressions, Vogues, are pretty long-lasting for kids to keep Nebraska in the conversation.
Yeah, and that's become its primary function, and it still exists as that. I mean, the spring window is good. We know for some of these recruits, like, it's not easy to get to Nebraska because they're not all that close. But you've got this spring window where you can do it. I mean, honestly, if I were Nebraska's brain trust, I'd schedule my spring game. Well, we had a hard out, so to speak, with new turf going in. But I'd schedule that around the opportunity to maximize it. And, I don't know if you want to be first or last in terms of getting these kids spring visits, but one or the other, just so the most possible players have the ability to come, because ESPN and I think, various other networks are going to televise 12 or 14 spring games today, and I'll probably, hop over to check in on each one of them. And other than Alabama and maybe Georgia, which is having a title celebration, not many of them are going to look like Nebraska's looked like last year in terms of just the sheer size of it and the fan support. So you've got to use that to your advantage. And I think Nebraska does a pretty good job of trying to do that.
Okay, that all said, we can maybe make have a few observations and takeaways that you hope have some merit as you enter the actual season. At the running back position, we talked a little bit about this in the first hour, but it did appear that the running backs in particular, there was an emphasis on getting north. And when you see a hole, you accelerate through it come hell or high water. Did you come away with that same impression that the running backs in particular have maybe been coached a little differently and that there's maybe a different emphasis than in years past?
Yeah, a little bit. It seemed a little more sudden, a little more purposeful, I guess, for lack of a better term. And I came out of that first half with, I guess, who I'd consider the top three at this stage between Ramir Johnson, Yant, and Anthony Grant. And I thought they all looked pretty good and extremely in circumstances that were not conducive to running backs excelling. So I thought that was encouraging. And in the second half, you saw, I think, a little bit more of what we'd heard about the offensive line, because then you kind of could pin your ears back a little bit and just play football. So, we'll see. I mean, when I look at Nebraska in 2022, and this has been the case for a couple of years now, but once again, I mean, I think their biggest growth area is some increased efficiency. They haven't had a problem with explosiveness, increased efficiency in the run game. If they can get that, all of a sudden, they can be, I think, a pretty good team. If you look at Casey Thompson, Chuba Purdy, whoever may end up playing quarterback, Logan Smothers, your passing doesn't take a huge hit, and you just add that running piece. Well, all of a sudden, you start to have something.
Brandon, while we're talking about the running game, we better mention the offensive line. So I want to pose the question to you. Is Garrett Nelson that good? Is our pass protection that bad, or is this just overreaction from one practice?
I think a Venn diagram that might include all three of those things in the middle. I'm really high on Garrett Nelson for the season ahead. I mean, he's improved a little bit each year he's been on campus. We remember him as a true freshman where he was like a clear motor and effort guy. And, you could kind of see the gears turning in terms of making that transition to major college football. Got a little bit better in 2020, and then last year got even better again. And a lot of the talk this spring was about him kind of emerging as a leader. And, he's been a guy that we see up there pretty frequently at those press conferences. And I think he's going to be a guy you see up there every week in 2022. So I'm pretty bullish on his 2022 season. Pass protection, big issue for Nebraska last year. And maybe it's not a surprise that it didn't look completely fixed in the first half of the spring game. That's going to remain. I mean, it's going to remain a pretty big liability until they show they've made some gains there. And then just the run game overall, again, saw a little bit more, I think, there in the second half from that offensive line, but it's a tough one to judge given the circumstances of that spring game.
Pardon the interruption, but I'd like to save you some money. I'm Brandon Vogel, managing editor of Hail Varsity, and I wanted to offer listeners of this podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce, 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at hailvarsity.com. Just go to hailvarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's hailvarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Few minutes, Brandon Vogel with us from Hail Varsity. We're recapping some spring game thoughts. Vogues, to go back to Garrett Nelson and his growth from an in-state recruit to kind of the voice on that defense. It sounds like he's done a pretty good job of mentoring as well, and that's where I want to go. You know about Tanner, you know about Nelson. Those are the two guys you want to see major steps from getting after the quarterback. And Nelson didn't have a bad year a year ago getting to the quarterback. But let's talk about what's behind him. Are you feeling okay? I mean, we don't get to see all the progress until Saturdays with Coach Dawson. Now, that said, maybe Nebraska's building something here with development for Garrett Nelson to be a guy that can come off the edge and be a third down problem. Butler and of course, Blaze Gunnerson, both those guys. Comment on each of those guys as maybe a role that you could see them having as fall emerges.
Yeah, they're going to need some more depth there. I mean, just generally along the defensive front, which in this case I would include those guys that you just mentioned. That's largely the role that they shared or hold. I thought Butler looks pretty good in the spring game. Blaze Gunnerson continues to be kind of one of those under the radar guys. I mean, I know he was a pretty high profile recruit, and he's just kind of been building a little bit behind the scenes, but man, he looks the part, and it helps that he changed his number to 97. Looks even more the part of kind of that pass rusher type. So those guys are going to have to play, and they're going to have to play some meaningful snaps. I think Garrett Nelson, we already discussed, like, I like where he's at, and I think where he's going. Caleb Tanner a little bit too. Like, if he just kind of continues on a little bit of a linear trajectory from where he was at last year, that's a pretty good tandem. Like, I think if you play good overall team defense and you can get yourself into some favorable down and distance situations, those guys are plenty good enough to cause some problems. Are they good enough to be every down problems? You know, guys that Nebraska saw a lot of in 2021 on opposing defensive lines? I don't know yet. But I think they're headed that direction. And that's encouraging. You're going to need more than just those two to make it through a full Big Ten slate.
Brandon Vogel is with us on Hail Varsity Radio. ESPN comes out with their FPI projections, and they do a lot of analytics to kind of arrive at an expected win-loss total. Last year, they had Nebraska pegged for 4-8. Nebraska ends up 3-9. This year, they have Nebraska essentially pegged, depending on how you went around it, but about 7.5 wins and about 4.5 losses. And the favorite to win the Big Ten West. Did that catch your attention? Do you buy into the FPI as a pretty accurate predictor?
So I was a little surprised Nebraska was that high. I mean, you can look at the schedule and you compare it to Wisconsin, and we're talking less than 1 percentage point in terms of their given probability to win the West. And you can kind of get there. I mean, the West, to me, in 2022 is super interesting because I think if you include Nebraska in that, which for FPI's purposes, you know, they're looking at Nebraska as basically a 7-win team last year, not a 3-win team. So that's the starting point for all of this. I think got Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, Nebraska, Purdue, all teams I could see legitimately winning the West. So it's kind of a jumbled mess. Nebraska comes out on top in this particular model by a tiny bit. And you look at the schedule and you say, yeah, maybe that could add up. So that's where that is. I mean, I've looked a lot at preseason to final FPI a couple of years ago. I went all the way back to 2014. And in terms of the win totals, the projected win totals, the standard deviation there was about 2.2. So if Nebraska is at 7.5, that means 2/3 of the time they're going to be between basically 6 wins and potentially 9 wins if you round them off to numbers. So when these projections come out, I always try to keep that in mind. You've got a range here that is most likely. And is that accurate? I think it is pretty accurate. I think that's a pretty good job of modeling for a sport that is kind of inherently unpredictable.
So, Vogues, what's your feel kind of blindly here going into fall? Is it, okay, there's enough talent, even though it's new, between players and coaching staff to hit this preseason number, or is it a big ask because it's new faces on the coaching staff and in the quarterback room and a wide receiver? How do you look at it?
I think there's definitely enough talent to do it, you know, particularly in the West, and whether you're talking about SB Plus and other ESPN's, you know, Power Metrics or FPI, the benefits to Nebraska. And again, like, this isn't going to be how these teams are evaluated at the end of the year, but you can look at it now and say, well, they get Indiana, they get Northwestern, they get Illinois, and they get Rutgers. And those are the lowest rated 4 teams in the Big Ten in both of those ratings. So that's where some of this comes from. I mean, for these models, they look at it as, here's what your talent is based on recruiting, et cetera. Trying to figure out fit, you know, that's where we come in and talk about it on a Saturday morning. So I think they'll be okay. Like, implementing some new talent, some of those new faces who are going to have an impact, whether that's on defense, whether that's on offense. Biggest thing, and I mean, every season kind of comes down to this a little bit, but given where Nebraska's coming from, like, they've just got to be better up front. They've got to be better on the offensive line, absolutely, in both run blocking, but particularly pass protection. And then the defensive line, which, is going to see a handful of new guys, relatively new guys, can't take a major step back. Nebraska can do those two things. Then, yeah, I think 7.5 wins is fairly reasonable.
If you take a snapshot right now of the quarterback room and the quarterback position, can you think of a time when Nebraska was more well-stocked at the quarterback position than they are right now?
No. I mean, the only comparison that kind of comes to mind is maybe that 2010 year where you went into that and you had Cody Green, Taylor Martinez, and Zach Lee. I think he was still around for that year, but we didn't know much about those guys. But that's kind of the last real three-headed competition I can remember at Nebraska, and we saw in 2009 kind of a continual shuffling between Cody Green and Zach Lee, and you had that amazing defense and couldn't quite get it to a point it needed to be. So, but in terms of overall talent, in terms of having two guys who, played at Texas and Florida State and are now competing at Nebraska, this is probably as good a depth as I can remember at Nebraska.
And Brandon, we'll see if there's any departures from that quarterback room. Pretty stacked. I think running back's another position that people are watching for transfer portal action, outgoing departures from Nebraska as well. But are you surprised we haven't seen anyone on the roster declare their intentions to enter the transfer portal here a week removed from spring practice? I mean, there's still 3 weeks plus finals week left in the UNL calendar. Should we wait for that to see what the outgoing transfer is going to look like, or do you think we're looking good now a week removed from the spring game?
Yeah, I wouldn't say Nebraska's out of the woods yet. I mean, it's mildly surprising to me that we haven't heard anything, even a player who might have been like, oh, I was surprised they were here for the spring. I think you were right to mention it. Kind of the end of the semester is the hard cap here, because if you're going to look around, you're going to want to have some time to do that, and then hopefully you can get enrolled by summer if you're a player who's looking to go elsewhere. So I think we'll have that. We'll have attrition to a certain degree at Nebraska over the weeks to come, and just kind of be expected. And once you have that, we'll see. And that's going to happen all across the country. See what Nebraska wants to do or tries to do in the transfer portal, and head into summer. And at that point, hopefully you got it mostly locked down in terms of what this roster is going to look like.
Brandon Vogel's with us. Vogues, what's on the calendar for Hale Varsity? What's Junior up to today?
Junior's eating some bananas and Cheerios at the moment. He's staying mostly calm, so solid start to the weekend. No, we got some good stuff coming up on Hale Varsity. Aaron Sorensen has a good story on women's golf that's going up this morning. Be sure to check that out. We'll have a little bit of softball, have additional coverage from baseball today, and then continue to work through what we did and what we didn't see. Spring football. Steve Marek in particular has been doing a great job with that this week, and that'll continue throughout the offseason.
How's Junior's arm with said Cheerios and banana?
He doesn't throw things a lot yet. So
future soccer player.
Yeah, actually, it might be. And I'd be okay with that. As I watch
he isn't
play this morning.
Well, let me know when he gets that arm all kind of loosened up and your dodging ability. So
yeah, he's clapping now. He's got that part down.
That's pretty good. Have a good weekend, folks. Thanks so much.
All right, guys. Take care.
Kraynak, did you endure the dodging of macaroni?
Oh yeah, there's a lot of flinging of food, smearing it on the face.
Did you laugh, or were you like stern about it?
Well, I finally decided, hey, I'm in my 40s. I need to stop doing this. I just need to eat it. And, things became a lot cleaner and simpler after
Well done. Yeah. Well, good enough. We will spend some time with the Iron Horse. Gary Sharp's on the way. Weekend edition continues at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Like what you hear? High-quality radio and podcast is part of what we do at Hail Varsity. Hey, it's Chris Schmidt with Hail Varsity Radio, and I wanted to offer listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we produce. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter in the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Glad to have you back.
Yes, sir. You heard me right.
Here are the guys, Schmidt and Kraynak.
Well, Hector, here's the game plan. You're going to bring us 2 absolute martinis. You know how I like them, straight up. And then precisely 7.5 minutes after that, you're going to bring us 2 more. Then 2 more after that every 5 minutes until one of us passes out.
Excellent strategy, sir.
Back with your weekend edition at Hail Varsity, presented by the Nebraska Lottery. Chris Schmidt, Mark Kraynak, Elijah Herbal running the show. We say hi to the Iron Horse, Gary Sharp. Sharpie on site with us last weekend at the Single Barrel. Good to spend time with him. Sharpie, how's the week, man? What do you know?
You know what? Nice little quiet week. Happy Easter to both of you, all 3 of you, and all of our listeners.
Thank you, man. Same to you and your fam. And, a lot to kind of sift through. But on Twitter last night, I got to hear more about this bouncy house. Please tell us.
Oh, yeah. So here's the story. So, I when you grow up in the Midwest and then you move away, fish fries were never like a big deal. I mean, I knew they existed. Like I grew up Catholic, and that was during the Lenten season. But in Omaha, fish fries are huge. I mean, it's like a cultural experience. And so I went last night. Now, I did not know. Now I know who this person's house is. But I went as somebody said, "Hey, let's go to a fish fry." I at somebody's house, and I'm like, "Really?" So this person that put on the fish fry, they're retired, so they do a lot of fishing. And they build up to this one day every year on Good Friday where they host a fish fry for, like, the neighborhood and all their friends. And all the fish that they cook up is fish that they have caught over the last year from the upper Midwest and Canada. And it was incredible. And then I went in the backyard, and there's a bounce house. And I'm like, oh, boy, this is on tilt. It was kind of interesting. It was a nice mixture of fish fry for kids and a fish fry for adults, and a good way to end the Lenten season. But man, fish fries are huge in Omaha. There is nothing like it up here.
That's really cool. You just hit home talking about catching fish all year to build up to the payoff, right? The monster fish fry. My mom's dad, Grandpa Hunt, would catch every crappie in western Nebraska for the first weekend of August in the annual family Hunt family picnic in Holdridge, Nebraska. And he was always great about measuring the amount of bush light he put into the fish and that he put into himself. He was minimal with how much Busch Light he drank, but man, he took care of all the consumers. So that's really cool. Shout out to Timmy Berta, Coach Berta, and his walleye fish fry. He does that in the summertime. So you are hitting home with me this morning on fish fries. Good work.
Yeah, it was. I'm feeling it on both ends this morning, though.
You're up, Mark. You follow that.
How's everything coming out this morning?
Oh, no. Was it a first half of the spring game or a second half of the spring game?
It was. So speaking of leaky.
No. Dang. Oh.
And running game. Runs. I don't know. I got nothing. I'm thrown off right now.
Well, let's just put it this way: there is minimal thudding.
Thank you.
And with that said, I think, guys, the most impressive position group to me, because we'll never be able to agree on a proper spring format, but I think that's the way college football is going in the spring, is the format we saw what Nebraska's using, what like Ohio State is using. But I think the running backs, even though they could only be tackled in the second half, I think the running backs came out of spring giving you some encouragement that position might be headed in the right direction, considering there are 2 additions to that room before you get to kickoff in August. I really liked what I saw out of the running back room from top to bottom, whether it was Anthony Grant to Ramir Johnson all the way down to the 9th guy carrying the ball. I think Brian Applewhite has got that room turned around, and I think that's an encouraging part for Nebraska going into the fall.
Yeah, Gary, that's what we were talking about in the first hour, and also with Brandon just now. Is it just feels like across the board, you're right, from top of the list all the way down to guys we'll probably never see carry the ball in Memorial Stadium again. They get north, right? Like you see a hole, you accelerate through it. Just seems like a real point. It looked very different than what we've seen from that position in a long time.
Well, I think the pad level, just the vision, and it's also going to take the 5 guys up front. But it looked like a group that had been coached really well. Like, technically, they were sound. See, that's why, like at quarterback, we don't know how the Whipple offense is all going to unfold with everybody that's got to work together. But I do know this. Like Brian Applewhite will make the running backs better as running backs. I think Mark Whipple will make the quarterbacks better as quarterbacks. Those are 2 position groups that struggled to get the most out of the current players that were in that room, but a lot of it was just pure fundamentals. Technically, they were off. I think if you looked at the quarterbacks, they all kind of looked the same. We weren't saying, boy, he can't, his arm slot is low, and, well, what is he doing? I think those are 2 position groups on the offensive side of the ball. They're going to be better coached. Now, what does that mean when you get into the heart of the season? Well, I think it could mean a lot, but I think that's a nice little development in a spring where we still might have more questions than we have answers.
Sharpie, are you still portal shopping for any spots after spring?
Well, I think you always are, but you got to remember, are you trying to add pieces for depth? Is there pieces out there that can help you be better? Is there a starter out there? Definitely on the defensive line. I think Nebraska has to develop depth. They have to find more bodies. Of course, if you get a guy like O'Shawn Mathis, that's a difference maker. But how many of those guys are going to be in the portal here, and how many of those guys are going to have Nebraska on the radar? But I think any time that you're looking, you're always looking. You're always playing roster management. The exit interviews have started with players. I would imagine we're going to have 3 or 4 players, scholarship players, that are going to leave after spring, which is fine. And, I think that'll happen over the next couple of weeks. But the exit interviews have started. I think the door is always open. If you can find a player that can help with depth or is a difference maker, of course you've got to say, hey, come on down. But what is Nebraska's mode to get them? What is their selling point? Who are they beating? Why are they better than some other place? Oh, just playing time, or does name, image, likeness, all of that stuff come in? But defensive line is an area where, man, I don't know about the guys that are on campus now that are not your frontline guys. I'm worried there. So I think you got to find some experience, if you can, in the defensive line in the portal.
Which quarterback caught your attention the most?
I would say Purdy and Harburg.
Yep, and Purdy. It was Purdy for me. And so break those 2 down. What about both of their performances caught your eye?
Well, Purdy, we were like, is this guy always going to be injured? And he came here and he wasn't healthy. And then, once he got cleared, he kind of took off. I like his command of the offense. It didn't seem like it was a roller coaster out there. He threw a nice ball. The ball he threw to Rollins, he went up in High Point, and how good was A.J. Rollins this spring. But the offense seemed to move, and you could tell people around him were very comfortable while he was out there with the offense. Now, granted, we're breaking this down over the course of a spring game. But I like how he threw the ball. I like how he had decision-making. I think they want the quarterbacks to stay in the pocket a little bit more than maybe we saw on Saturday. But he's got a lot of athleticism, and I think the thing you hear from people at Florida State is if he can stay healthy. If he can stay healthy, then he's everything that he was advertised coming out of high school. And that's huge for Nebraska because I think Smothers had a good half of the spring, and then Purdy, I think, getting healthy has put some pressure on Smothers for that number 2 job. Now with Harburg, they've liked Harburg for a while. Big boy arm. They just need to develop him. You know, he was you had to put some weight on him. You had to coach him up coming out of Kearney Catholic. But boy, the way he threw the football is exactly like I was told he was throwing it during practice last fall. I'm excited to see him. But those are the 2 guys. And then we don't want to overlook Casey Thompson, but we saw him for 3 series. We saw him make, he did nothing that you go, oh no. He was better in the 14 practices than the brief time that he showed on Saturday.
Gary, as it stands right now, do you think we should expect any departures from this quarterback room moving forward? I mean, the most likely candidates you'd look at, Smothers and Harburg, those are the 2 guys that seem to be, I don't want to say on the outs, but with the new coaching staff, they have the toughest hill to climb to find themselves a role in this offense moving forward. Do you see any departures out of this quarterback room coming in the next couple weeks?
I think all 4 of us talked about before spring began, okay, in that quarterback room at Survivor Island, who's going to get voted off? I don't see anybody leaving. I think Logan feels that under this new system and new position coach that he can change his game. And I don't think he's ready to leave. I think he is, as of right now, guys, I think he's a 2, and there might be an or there with Purdy. But I believe that Smothers had a good spring, and he really believes that he could be the guy if called upon. Now it's just a case of, does he want to sit behind the starter once again? But I don't think there'll be anybody leaving that room going into the fall. And, if Smothers decided that there was a better place for him, at least you have Purdy who made progress enough that you go, okay, we can withstand this. But I think, guys, the Nebraska quarterback room, when you could go 3 and maybe even 4 deep, you feel better about than you felt in a long time.
Sharpie, you mentioned where the quarterbacks and their connection with Whipple. This kind of goes back to something he was talking about with one of his roundtables he had with us, that he had 7 or 8 quarterbacks at Pitt, right? I mean, Pitt didn't have a lot of defections, at least when he was there. Is Nebraska in position, and maybe we're zooming out too much on this, but maybe guys will just kind of suck it up and stay because they feel like this guy can get me better and teach me quite a bit, even if I'm not playing. Maybe it'll be a long-term approach with that quarterback room.
I think so. I think he's got enough of a track record.
Yeah.
People are like, okay, you know what? I may not be the first guy up, but, man, look at what he has done and look at the experience he has had to coach me up and make me a better quarterback. I also think this is another aspect of it, not just the simple quarterback play of 5-step drop, 7-step drop, your reads, everything else that he is teaching guys and giving them, they're getting a library of things to look at, is I think guys feel better about how this offense is going to operate. That this offense is going to play to their strengths and not play to their weaknesses. And so if you're a quarterback that might be further down on the depth chart, you're thinking, I can develop in this offense. I can make my way up the offense. I like playing for him. That's another key point. We always just assume that guys are just going to bolt because, they're further down the depth chart. They can't see any playing time. Some guys, that might be the case. They still like competition, but they also like their position coach. And I think that's the case with Whipple. I think he's got a good relationship with those guys that why wouldn't you stay here and work on your craft? And if it doesn't work out, you can go somewhere. But he's going to make you fundamentally a better quarterback, I believe.
How about the offensive line? We heard so much about them firing off the ball and maybe having a little bit of a different style. Offensive line play is, if you didn't play it, it's pretty subtle. It's not the easiest thing to just watch and notice. But from folks you've talked to, what you observed, did you see a difference there?
Well, the difference I see is that Nebraska desperately needs Corcoran and Prohaska to come back. I thought the tackle play was really, really poor. And, it wasn't like Garrett Nelson and his gang was doing anything different. They weren't running stunts or anything like that. And I thought the tackles really, really struggled. I think what Nebraska may have found through the course of spring is they've figured out their interior offensive line. I think Trent Hickson, if you started in Northwestern on this Saturday, I think Trent Hickson could be your center, and you wouldn't have a problem with it. And then I think you got Noelle, and Kevin Williams has to play on the other guard spot. I think Kevin Williams has gotten his body headed in the right direction. He's got some football under his belt, and he's also got that tenacity, and I think he's a smart football player that they need out of that guard spot. So I think they may have figured out guard, center, guard, and now they have to figure out, does Corcoran and Prohaska come back and slide right back into those tackle spots? I think it's an interesting case with Benhart. Benhart didn't have a great spring game. I'm not really sure what kind of a spring he had, but he can't play guard. So, he's kind of stuck. If he can't play, if he's not the starting tackle, he's the backup tackle because you can't move him. But I think on the offensive line, there's still question marks because of your two key pieces that didn't play. But I think you figured out guard, center, guard.
I want to go to Benhart for a second. High-profile kid, Minnesota, giant body. And do you think it's more about technique refinement? Is it a speed of the game thing, or is it a confidence thing? Any insight to his progress or what may be stalling it?
Well, I think it's a little bit of everything, Schmidt. And I think the bend. He's a guy that has played a lot of football for Nebraska, but they need better at that position. And I don't know if they can get better out of him. Sure. He may have given you his best moments. I think there's some things physically and technically that still plague him. And that's why I say he can't, everybody says, well, he can just slide down to guard. Well, that's a heck of a transition. And some people are not built to move and play tackle, go to guard. I don't think Benhart is a guard. Thus, he's got to stay outside. And I think he struggled. And you know what? If he wasn't your tackle, you could get away because Teddy Prohaska is a Sunday guy. And then I think Turner Corcoran on the outside. I think Nebraska's better with Corcoran at tackle than they are at center. And does Benhart then become a guy that can play both sides? We'll wait and see. But I just don't think Bryce Benhart is starting for you come the fall.
Mark, I'm going to jump ahead of you just real quick here because the way I see it is I don't see much of a difference physically, technique-wise between Prohaska and between Benhart. The difference I see is Prohaska's got a different kind of mentality than Benhart on the offensive line, more harkening back to that 90s offensive line in terms of aggression, firing off the ball. Is that what you see?
Well, I think I think Teddy's athletically. If you're going forward with Teddy or he's dropping back in pass pro, I don't think you see much of a difference. Teddy's going to find a way to be dominant. Nebraska in pass pro has struggled at times. I don't like Benhart as a get behind him and run downhill and he's going to blow somebody up. If you had to do that with Teddy, that would be the case. Now, I don't want to turn this into an all-Teddy fest because there is the caveat. Teddy still hasn't played a lot of college football. Remember, he didn't get inserted in the lineup until early in the year, and then he got injured against Michigan. So essentially, as a starter, he played a game plus, but there's a lot of things to like about him that Nebraska needs, whether he's downhill blocking, getting to the second level, or he's in pass pro. Because I'll tell you what, going back to Saturday, if you're making a list of things that you are disturbed by, the tackle play was number 1A, 1B, 1C on your list.
Like what you hear? High-quality radio and podcasts are just part of what we do at Hail Varsity. I'm Brandon Vogel, managing editor, and I wanted to offer listeners of the Hail Varsity Radio Show podcast $10 off the price of an annual subscription. That means that you, for less than $20, can get everything we do. 10 issues of our monthly magazine, our annual football yearbook, and all of the premium content we produce at HailVarsity.com. Just go to HailVarsity.com/subscribe and enter the promo code GBR for $10 off a full year of Hail Varsity. That's HailVarsity.com/subscribe, promo code GBR.
Gary Sharp with us, Hail Varsity Radio. Flip over to the Nebraska baseball real quick. What's going on there?
Hey, can I ask a quick question here?
What's going on?
Can I ask it?
Excuse me.
Isn't it interesting how, coming into the football season, because, guys, I did the same thing this week on my show. The defense has a lot of holes to fill because of the veterans they've lost. And this time in 2 weeks, we're going to talk about guys from that defense side of the ball that are possibly getting drafted. Nobody's really talking about the defense. That'll be a thing that we're going to have to spend some time on in the offseason because they still have some major question marks outside of what we're talking about the defensive line. But to answer your question, let's do shift to baseball if we have to.
let's stay on the defense. Well, no, that goes back to the portal question because, Sharpie, you've got a lot of young guys that I think can get chiseled into Big Ten defensive interior linemen. But what's the deadline for them? I mean, can you water and grow them, man? Can you throw Miracle Grow on from a football ready standpoint? And that's just hard to do on the lines of scrimmage. I like Nash, but you look at the combined snaps you lost versus combined backup snaps that have played, and it's pretty frightening.
Well, here's my problem with the defensive line. You got some young guys, and you have a sense of urgency a little bit quicker to develop guys and get them playing. I don't know, and this includes Nash Hutmacher. Guys, I don't know if Nebraska has many guys on that defensive line that are going to give you 25-plus snaps in the Big Ten right now. I don't know if you have a couple of guys that you'd be shocked if they gave you 5-plus snaps in the Big Ten and held their own. That's where I'm worried about. I need to see more from Hutmacher. He's strong, but is that his only attribute? If you want him to play 35, 40 snaps in the Big Ten, he's got to get better other than his strength. Now to baseball. Mark, if I told you, hey, go watch the Nebraska baseball team, and you know Will Bolt like you do, would you go, what happened to Will Bolt? Is he not coaching this team this year?
It doesn't look like a Will Bolt team, and you're completely right. It's just the aggressiveness on offense is lacking. The base running isn't great. The defense isn't great. There's no one thing that you can point to and say, well, at least they can hang their hat on that. It's just a team that, like, every game, every inning is a grind with this team right now. What is it that you think they're missing? Because they've recruited well. Is it just arm injuries that's really, well, no, it can't be that because they're not hitting the ball either.
Well, I keep using the word, they're so uneven. Like, they've gotten, a couple of games in the series against BYU. They got some really good pitching. Mm-hmm. But then the bats disappear. And then one night when they score 6 runs, the pitching lets them down. It is such an uneven team, and they're missing the X factor, the little ingredients from last year, and some talent that probably we overlooked because we thought guys from last year would make the jump. But they're piecing together that pitching staff because of the injuries on the mound and now the departure of Jokin. I think we're all we need to stop, wishing and hoping. They are who they are. They're kind of a middle-of-the-pack Big Ten team that is 500. And I don't know that they're going to break out of it and all of a sudden go on this run. And the most important thing is just get to Omaha and see what happens. Don't be out of the Big Ten tournament. But it's frustrating. And after last night's game, losing those 2 one-run games, being swept by BYU, the comments by Will, he's trying to stay positive and push the right buttons because there's still a good amount of the season to go. But, man, I think he's getting towards the end of, man, what do I do? He's going to grow up from this season as a coach, but, gosh, that's not who Will Bolt is. That's not a reflection of his personality and his style, the way that team is playing, and that's really, really disappointing. But it just, I don't know, maybe guys, we did something to somebody because the men's sports in Nebraska just keep kicking us below the belt.
Yeah. Well, Sharpie, we'll regroup and try and see if it's a better. Well, it's got to be a better Saturday, right? Because there's no men's sports. I mean, you have baseball, obviously, but it's been an adventure for sure. Have a great weekend with family and friends. Gary, thanks for jumping on with us today.
Hey, as always, Mark and Elijah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Take care, bud. Good stuff. We will be back at you Monday for Hail Varsity Radio. Kraynak, have a good weekend.
Godspeed, sir. You as well.
All right. Elijah, appreciate you, brother. We'll talk Monday at 4 on Hail Varsity.
A Hurrdat Media Production.